I was halfway through peeling off my gloves when the message came in. I'm leaving you and moving to Santa Barbara with my 26-year-old. Also, I've moved all our money. Good luck. It was 3:03 a.m. I was in the middle of the Bay of Bengal, just off a 13-hour shift on the rig. I stood there for a moment, frozen. The hum of generators behind me, sweat sticking to my collar. The message didn't make sense at first. Then a second one followed. A screenshot. Our joint account, $0.58. It should have read nearly 162,000. She even added a broken heart emoji. Like this was the ending to some teen romance. My name is Caleb Morton. I'm 54 years old. I've worked oil rigs for almost 3 decades. 29 years of steel, salt, and sunburn. And for 20 of those, I was married to Elena. I didn't yell, didn't throw my phone, didn't punch anything. I just sat down on my bunk, typed, "Sure, good luck." Turned the phone off, took a cold shower, didn't sleep. Next morning, the crew sensed something was off. I skipped breakfast, walked straight into the control room. Reese. My second-in-command shot me a look but said nothing. He knew better than to ask. This wasn't the place for emotional breakdowns. We had 18 men on this platform, relying on us to keep them alive, and the whole system functioning. Personal pain that waited behind closed doors. Later during lunch break, I checked my email, and there it was, the divorce filing. Elena claimed I had abandoned the marriage emotionally and physically, said my work overseas made her feel like a widow. She'd retained a lawyer, Cameron Stroud, the kind that specializes in high-asset splits. She wanted spousal support. Claimed she'd supported me emotionally through my toxic work obsession. I closed the laptop, didn't mention a word to anyone. But that night I wrote one email, not to her, to Nathan, my cousin back in Denver. Time to activate Winter Protocol. That was our code, one we came up with after watching our uncle get wiped out in a divorce. No explanation needed. 3 minutes later. Already on it. Radio silence until you're back stateside. I still had 2 weeks left on rotation. 2 weeks of 12-hour shifts in 110-degree heat. While my life, everything I thought was mine, got pulled apart piece by piece back home. I could have asked for emergency leave, but what would that fix? Better to finish the job, cash the last paycheck, and prepare. That night, Victor, the rig supervisor, knocked on my door. Everything's stable. He wasn't just asking about equipment. Everything's under control, I said. And it was. Just not the way Elena thought. We met 21 years ago in Flagstaff. She was 33, I was 34. She worked part-time at a fishing store full of sharp jokes and sharper eyes. I was home between contracts helping a buddy stock inventory. We got married 11 months later. Fast, yes. But it made sense, back then. By then, I already owned my house from an early investment that paid off. My income from offshore contracts was more than anyone in town saw in 5 years. She said she admired my focus. I admired her spark. We agreed I'd take the overseas jobs. She'd keep the home fires burning. It worked for a while. But around year 13, the cracks started forming. First, it was birthdays I missed. Then, do you really need to take the Qatar rotation? Then came the resentment. She'd host dinner parties without me. Redecorated the whole house one Christmas. While I was gone, didn't even mention it. 2 months ago, I noticed $4,000 moving from our joint account to a name I didn't recognize. House repairs, she'd said. I drove by the place before this rotation. No construction crew, but a sleek black BMW parked out front. A week into my shift, I got a message from our neighbor Howard. A photo of a moving truck in the driveway. Thought you should know. I didn't reply, didn't call, didn't rage. I waited. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a man can do is not react. Let the truth unfold. 2 nights later, the satellite phone rang. It was Nathan. You sitting down? Just say it. She's been planning this for 15 months, started moving money to an account under her maiden name. Small amounts at first, then bigger. Total, so far, $214,000. I swallowed hard. That's more than what was in the joint account. Because she also took out a $45,000 line of credit against the house, forged your signature. Oh, what else? She changed the beneficiary on your life insurance 6 months ago. And the new guy, his name's Derek Cole, age 26, personal trainer, 3 relationships with women over 40 in the last 3 years. All ended after the money dried up. My stomach dropped, not just at the betrayal, but at the math, at the quiet, methodical dismantling of my life. While she smiled, while she kissed me goodbye at the airport, while she told me to be safe. That's when something in me changed. The hurt hardened. The emotions cooled. I stood up, walked to my locker, pulled out my private laptop. Logged into the account only Nathan and I knew about. Moss Creek Holdings, named after my grandmother's favorite hiking trail. There it was, $1.8 million. 8 years of redirecting 70% of my earnings. Fully legal, fully separated through corporate shielding Nathan had built. Then I typed one more message. Proceed with cold return. I closed the laptop, went to the mess hall, poured myself a coffee, and for the first time in days I felt hungry. 40 hours after my rotation ended, I landed in Denver. Nathan was waiting by the arrivals gate holding a folder and a prepaid phone. He didn't say much, didn't have to. She's called your regular number 9 times in the last day, probably realizing the walls are closing in. We didn't go to my old house. We went straight to Thomas Keller's office, my lawyer. A tactician. Cold but honest. He'd already reviewed the documents Nathan sent. Bank trails, fake signatures, insurance fraud. We're not just looking at a divorce, Caleb, he said, setting down the file. This is a criminal case, and the court will see it that way. She hadn't just emptied accounts. She forged my name on financial documents, changed legal designations while I was 6,000 miles away. What's our play? We already filed an emergency freeze on all her active accounts, and the LLC she moved the money into. The bank flagged the transfer and locked it pending your in-person confirmation. I nodded. And that's not the most pressing update, Thomas added. He slid a tablet across the table, a list of text messages. These are from her iCloud backup. She never unlinked her devices from your shared Apple ID. I read in silence. It was like watching a stranger speak with her voice. Messages between Elena and someone labeled simply D. That had to be Derek. They joked about me working while they drank by the pool. Shared photos of the house they'd put a down payment on in Santa Barbara. Then I found it. Elena Bank froze the money. Need Caleb to verify. What do we do, Derek? He's still offshore, right? Tell him your mom's sick. Get him to authorize it. You're still legally his wife. Elena. He's not answering. Derek. Try harder, or we look at Plan B. Elena. I'm not comfortable with that. Derek. He works a dangerous job for a reason. Accidents happen all the time. I put the tablet down. My hands were steady, but I could feel the cold building inside me. Is this admissible, I asked. Yes, especially since she never removed you from the cloud and used your login credentials. Her negligence works in our favor. Thomas didn't sugarcoat things, and I appreciated that. We drafted a motion to freeze all her assets, filed a criminal complaint for financial fraud and identity forgery, and prepared to counterclaim every false statement in her divorce filing. There's one more complication, Thomas said, just as I was ready to leave. She filed a domestic violence report, claimed emotional abuse, said you controlled her finances and isolated her. I blinked. I was on a rig in the middle of the ocean for 2 months straight. Exactly. We pulled your offshore security logs, time card data, and travel records. She submitted the report 2 days ago after the money was frozen. It's an obvious manipulation. He slid another paper across the desk. A motion to dismiss the domestic abuse claim. Attached GPS data, company badge logs, airline tickets, phone records. Nothing showed aggression, no threatening messages, just silence, distance, proof. She wanted to ban you from your own house, Thomas said, and install a temporary restraining order so you couldn't interfere. While her boyfriend lives there. Exactly. I signed where he marked. Each signature felt like a declaration, not of war, but of clarity. You'll need to appear surprised when she gets served, he added. As far as she knows, you're still 6,000 miles away. I nodded. I can do that. That night I stayed at Nathan's apartment. Didn't sleep much. Too much adrenaline. Too many memories reshaping in real time. I logged into the home security feed from the house in Flagstaff, one she probably forgot I had access to, or assumed I couldn't view from overseas. The camera above the patio blinked to life. And there he was. Derek. Shirtless, wearing my college hoodie, feet up on my outdoor furniture, drinking my whiskey. I watched him laugh into the phone, oblivious, carefree. Elena walked into frame a minute later. She looked panicked, restless, pacing, gesturing, clearly stressed. The plan was unraveling. The pressure was setting in. Nathan entered the kitchen behind me, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You need to see this, he said, flipping open his laptop. Photos, screenshots, public records. He's done this before, at least 3 times that we can trace. Each time same pattern. Derek meets older woman. She's married, financially secure. Within 6 months, she files for divorce. They move away. And within 18 months, Derek disappears with whatever money he could grab. One ex-wife filed bankruptcy. Another's credit was destroyed by cards opened in her name. And one man, an ex-husband, died in a freak accident. His car went off a cliff just weeks after signing over life insurance and property in a rushed settlement. No charges were filed, but the implication was loud. She's desperate, Thomas said the next morning when we met again. The house in Santa Barbara closes in 4 days. They need those funds. I nodded. What's our next move? Emergency hearing this afternoon. We've got location data, financial proof, and the text logs. Judge Weaver doesn't tolerate fraud. Then Thomas paused. Also, this just came in. He handed me a file. Inside were fresh photos. Howard had sent them directly to Thomas's office. Images of movers loading antiques furniture and family heirlooms into a truck. My grandfather's desk. My mother's china. A painting that hung above my childhood fireplace. All being packed away. They're not waiting for the court, Thomas said. They're preparing to vanish, whether they get the money or not. I handed the folder back. Change of plan. He raised an eyebrow. I want to go home. That's not advisable before the hearing. You might... Not to confront her. I want to see it. From the house across the street. From Howard's place. I want to be there when it all comes down. Thomas looked at Nathan. Nathan nodded. We'll arrange it. That evening, we drove 6 hours back to Flagstaff. We pulled up at Howard's just before midnight. He greeted us with a nod, no questions. Retired oil man. He understood the weight of quiet vengeance. She has no idea I asked. None. They've been loading stuff all day. 2 more moving trucks scheduled for morning. Realtor came by earlier. Looks like they're trying to sell the house quick. Without me. Signature on the listing looks forged. We'll have that checked. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I sat at Howard's kitchen table. The documents Nathan had gathered laid out in front of me. Bank transfers, phone records, credit card receipts. Each page peeled back another layer, not just a betrayal of love, but of partnership, of trust, of identity. She hadn't just hurt me, she tried to erase me. By dawn, Thomas texted confirmation. She listed the house 2 days ago, 30% below market rate. The agent never verified my authorization. At 8:30 a.m., the final act began. I watched through Howard's blinds as Elena and Derek loaded small valuables into the BMW. Jewelry, silverware, my father's watch. At 8:45, the final moving truck arrived. And at 8:55, a black sedan blocked the driveway. 2 deputies stepped out, followed by a woman in a gray suit court liaison. It's time, I said. I stepped out of Howard's house and into the morning light. Across the street, 2 sheriff's deputies approached my front door. The woman with them, stern professional, held a thick folder of documents in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. I stayed just behind the line of hedges, not hiding, just observing, letting it all unfold. Elena answered the door, hair pulled back, sunglasses on her head. Her expression was tight, defensive. She crossed her arms as the officers identified themselves. I watched her lips move. Confusion at first, then realization, then fear. She turned and called for Derek. He strolled into view, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, wrapped an arm around her waist like he owned the place. And that's when I stepped forward. Their eyes landed on me at the same time. Elena's face changed instantly. I will never forget the progression. Shock, fear, calculation. She blinked. Caleb, you're supposed to be on the rig. Surprise, I said quietly. No anger, just quiet certainty. The court officer stepped forward and handed them the documents. Restraining orders, asset freezes, forgery complaints, emergency injunction against the home sale. Derek let go of her and squared up. You can't do this, he snapped. She's scared of you. That's why she left. Then the judge will love this part, I said, taking a printed screenshot from my coat pocket. The message about Plan B, about the insurance, about how accidents happen. The deputy glanced at it, then tucked it into the file. Derek's face drained of color. Elena's mouth parted slightly. She looked between us, calculating again. Caleb, this isn't what it looks like. I was just... Saving our documents, I said, gesturing to the truck behind them. Protecting our future, I continued. She fell silent. The court officer cleared her throat. You have 30 minutes to remove personal items, only clothing, toiletries, medication. Everything else stays until the court inventory is completed. Elena looked like she might argue, but Derek tugged her arm. Just do it, he muttered. They disappeared inside. I didn't follow, didn't say another word. I turned and walked back toward Howard's driveway. 29 minutes later, they came out again, one suitcase each. Elena held a small duffel close to her chest. The deputy opened the trunk of their BMW. They loaded their bags in silence. I stood by the mailbox. Elena turned to face me, eyes wet, lip trembling. "Caleb, please, we need to talk." I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Still nothing. "I was scared, okay? I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe if I—" "You thought maybe you'd erase me before I could respond?" I finally spoke. My voice was calm, no shouting, no accusation. Just truth. She blinked, stunned by the weight of it. Derek stepped forward again. "We'll fight this," he said. "You can't just trap people because you're bitter." I looked at him, truly looked. A boy playing dress-up in a man's disaster. He had no idea what this cost me, what it would cost him. "You're already in the trap," I said quietly. "You just didn't realize the door closed." He scoffed, but the tremor in his jaw gave him away. They got in the car, pulled out of the driveway, and just like that they were gone. Inside, the silence was heavy. Rooms I hadn't stood in for months now felt like crime scenes. Pillows out of place, furniture missing, my mother's piano gone. I didn't rage, didn't cry, just walked through each room, making note of what was no longer mine. At the kitchen table, I sat and read through the inventory Howard had helped document. The antique rocking chair I'd restored for our anniversary gone. The chest of letters from my father gone. Even the photo album from our wedding gone. She hadn't just moved on. She tried to wipe the slate clean. Thomas arrived an hour later. "They're officially served. Judge Weaver has already dismissed the domestic abuse claim. Location data proved your alibi beyond doubt." He handed me a copy of the ruling. She also referred the forgery and conspiracy evidence to the district attorney's office. "There may be criminal charges pending." I nodded. It was just beginning. "They tried to sell the house," he added. "We've voided the contract. The real estate agent has been notified. Any further action will require your approval per the court order." He looked around the hollow space. "I imagine this doesn't feel like a win." "It doesn't," I admitted, "but it's not a loss either." 3 weeks later, we stood in court. Elena on one side beside Cameron, her attorney. I sat with Thomas. Derek was nowhere to be seen, disappeared 2 days after being served. Took what remained of her jewelry and vanished, true to pattern. The judge read through every document. Bank records, forged agreements, the messages from her phone. She paused on the Plan B exchange, looked directly at Elena. "Mrs. Morton, do you understand the gravity of conspiring to commit insurance fraud, or worse?" Her attorney whispered frantically. Elena's eyes welled up again. "It wasn't real. It was just a joke. I would never—" "Save it for the criminal proceedings." The judge cut her off. "This court's concern is the dissolution of marriage and rightful asset division." She continued reading, occasionally shaking her head. When she finished, she removed her glasses and set them on the bench. "In my 30 years as a family court judge," she began, "I've rarely seen such a thorough and premeditated effort to defraud a spouse." She turned to me. "Mr. Morton, the court recognizes that your financial protections, while unconventional, were legal and properly declared. You contributed to household expenses, filed honest taxes, and maintained transparency outside of this marital deception." Her voice was steady. "All assets moved by Mrs. Morton shall be returned. The home remains your property. The motion for spousal support is denied." And this court refers the case of financial fraud and conspiracy to the district attorney. I didn't smile, didn't look at Elena, just stood, nodded to the judge, and walked out. Some victories don't need applause, they just need closure. 6 months passed. I sat on the porch of my cabin in the Rockies. 40 acres of pine, bought years ago through Moss Creek Holdings. A place Elena never knew existed. The sun dipped behind the ridge. A hawk glided overhead. I sipped bourbon from a glass etched with my father's initials, the same glass he used after long shifts when I was a boy. Nathan called occasionally. Howard sent a photo last week of the old house, now sold, repainted, new owners moving in. Elena took a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years probation. Restitution she'd likely never finish paying. Last I heard she was living with her sister in Reno. Retail job, no car, no Derek. He apparently was now dating a dermatologist in Tempe. Some patterns never break. I turned off my phone. No meetings, no messages. Just the sound of wind through the pines. And peace. The first week in the cabin felt like decompression from a life I hadn't realized I'd been suffocating in. No alarms, no status reports, no satellite calls. Just birdsong, wind, and the low groan of pine trees in the cold. I'd wake up before dawn, not because I had to, but because silence demanded it. I'd watch the mist lift off the meadow behind the cabin. Some mornings deer would pass through the tree line, unbothered, and I envied their instinct to move forward, no judgment, no backward glance. I spent the early days sorting what little remained of my old life. The last of my things had been shipped from the house in Flagstaff. Howard had made sure nothing important was left behind. A few heirlooms, my grandfather's pipe, the cedar box that once sat on my father's dresser still smelling faintly of tobacco and oak, and a photo album Elena hadn't managed to find. Inside our wedding day, the smiles once sincere, family members I hadn't seen in years, moments that once meant forever but now felt like someone else's story. I didn't tear the pages, didn't throw it in the fire. I just closed it and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Some things aren't meant to be erased, just put away. I started building furniture again, simple things at first. A small bench for the front porch, then a bookshelf, then a rocking chair like the one she took. My hands remembered before my mind did. Each curve of the wood brought back something older than the marriage, deeper than betrayal. Something that belonged only to me. People ask what hurts most after betrayal. It's not the money, not even the lies. It's the echo, the space where truth used to live. The late-night texts about missing me, knowing now they were typed while she lay next to him. The casual love yous, she whispered, while making plans to erase me. There's something corrosive about love repurposed as leverage. And that corrosion doesn't just eat trust. It eats your memory of who you were when you still believed. Nathan came up to visit 2 weeks in. He brought steaks, bourbon, and a file folder. Officially dissolved, he said, handing me the papers. Moss Creek Holdings is closed. Assets fully transferred. All taxes paid. No loose ends. I nodded. Thanks. We didn't talk much that night. Just grilled, drank, and watched the stars come out. At one point he asked, "If you could go back, would you still marry her?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because some truths need space before they land. I'd still marry her, I said eventually. Because for a while, it was real. And because everything I lost taught me who I actually am. He nodded. Hard lesson. The ones that stick always are. Elena tried to reach out and smile. Handwritten, no return address. It wasn't her. Not really. Just an explanation. Past confessions mixed with nostalgia. We were always together. The house felt colder every year. I didn't mean to fall out of love. It just happened gradually. And then all at once, she spoke about guilt, about fear, about the way Derek made her feel seen. But nowhere in the letter was the word sorry. Not for the money, not for the forgery, not for the betrayal. Only grief for what we used to be. And a final line that stayed with me. Sometimes I wonder if we broke because you were always building a future, and I was just trying to survive the present. I folded the letter, slid it into the same drawer as the wedding album, and closed it. There are goodbyes that are said with tears, and others that are said by choosing not to answer. Spring came early that year. I planted a small vegetable patch, tomatoes, spinach, herbs. Nothing fancy, just living things, rooted, dependent on time, effort, and consistency. Something I could tend instead of repair. I joined a local hiking group, middle-aged misfits mostly, divorcees, widowers, a few retirees who'd left everything behind to live closer to peace. We talked trail markers, elevation gains, and stories we didn't need to explain. I found out I wasn't alone, not in betrayal, not in rebuilding. Everyone had something they'd survived, a life they outgrew, a love that became absence. And every one of us had chosen to stay standing. People sometimes ask what revenge feels like. Here's the truth no one tells you. It's not the court victories. It's not watching the other person stumble. It's the morning you wake up, and don't think about them first. It's the meal you enjoy without bitterness clinging to your throat. It's the silence in your home that doesn't ache anymore. It's when you finally understand that peace isn't given, it's earned through endurance. And that no one, no betrayal, no theft, no broken promise can steal who you become after. I watched the news one evening, something I rarely did anymore. There was a segment about fraud recovery and insurance scams. A brief note about an Arizona man previously linked to 3 financial disappearances now under investigation again. Derek. The woman this time was a plastic surgeon in Tempe. He'd drained her accounts and vanished after opening 2 credit cards in her name. Same playbook, different cover. I didn't smile. I just turned the TV off and opened a window. Sometimes karma doesn't need your help, it just needs time. One last thing arrived before summer. A box, no return label, inside my father's watch. The one Elena had taken. No note, no explanation. Just the watch, cleaned, polished, still ticking. I held it for a while, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but as proof that some things return. Not because they're missed, but because their absence says too much. I wound it, strapped it on, and walked outside. The meadow was gold, with late sun. The air smelled like pine and old wood. And for the first time in years, I felt full, not of grief, not of vengeance, but of something deeper. Clarity. The day I finally took down the last box labeled Flagstaff felt symbolic. Not dramatic, not heavy, just necessary. I'd kept it tucked in the corner of the attic, half forgotten, half ignored. Inside were receipts, household manuals, old Christmas decorations, and a framed quote Elena once gave me on our anniversary. Home isn't a place, it's the person you come back to. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without fanfare, I set the frame on the workbench, took the glass out, recycled the quote, and saved the frame for something worth remembering. Life didn't change all at once, it never does, but slowly the edges softened. The silence in the cabin no longer echoed, it settled. The porch swing creaked with purpose instead of emptiness. And the photos I put up were chosen, not inherited from a life that no longer belonged to me. I bought a new record player, started collecting vinyl again, something I hadn't done since college. The crackle of old records, the weight of putting the needle down, it reminded me that sometimes we go backward to move forward. I got a call from an oil company based out of Alberta. They'd heard I was retired early, wanted to bring me in for consulting, minimal travel, maximum flexibility. The offer was generous. You'd only need to fly in twice a season, the woman on the line said, mostly remote. Legacy rig systems are your specialty. I didn't say yes, didn't say no. I'll think about it, I replied. And I meant it. But I also knew this. I no longer needed the money. I needed meaning. If I chose to take the work, it would be because I wanted to. Not because I was trying to prove anything. Not because I was building someone else's future while mine burned quietly back home. No. This time, if I chose, it would be on my terms. The following week, I was invited to speak at a local vocational school. One of the instructors was a former rig welder who'd known me from my Qatar rotation years ago. He said, "Most of these kids won't go to college, but they respect grit. They respect experience. They need to hear someone who's lived it." So I went. I stood in front of 28 young men and women, most of them barely 20, and told them the truth. Not just about the job, but about what it costs. The missed birthdays, the jet lag, the long nights in bunkhouses that smelled like metal and damp laundry. And I told them this. Whatever you do in life, protect your name, protect your peace, and don't build so hard for the future that you lose sight of what's happening in the present. One student asked me, "Would you do it all again?" I paused, then smiled. Yes. But I'd read the fine print next time, not just in contracts, but in people. One late afternoon, Howard called. "Mail came to your old address. Looks like a wedding invite. You want me to shred it?" "From who?" "Return label says Elena Collins. Looks like she's dropped the Morton." I thought for a moment. "Keep it," I said. "Might be the last one I ever get." "You thinking of going?" "Not even a little." We both chuckled. He paused before hanging up. "You did right, Caleb. Quiet, clean. Most folks would have burned it all down." "Some fires you don't light," I said. "You just let them burn themselves out." I never sent anything back. No RSVP, no reply. Just silence. And a week later, the invite sat unopened on my bookshelf between 2 volumes of woodworking manuals. A reminder, not of love lost, but of lessons earned. One evening in late July, I hiked out past the ridge behind the cabin. It was a quiet golden dusk, the kind that makes the whole world hum just under your skin. I sat on a fallen log near the old clearing where elk sometimes came through, pulled out my flask, and toasted the air. Not to her, not to the past. To me, to survival, to clarity. Closure isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or apologies. It arrives in moments like that, when you realize your breath is steady, and the weight that once lived in your chest is finally just memory. I used to think closure came from confronting the person who hurt you, but now I know the truth. Real closure comes when you stop needing them to explain it, when you stop checking their name, when their absence no longer feels like an unfinished sentence, when you stop wondering if they regret it, because it no longer matters. I still wear my father's watch, still sip bourbon from the same glass, still listen to old Springsteen records on the porch when the sun goes down. But I'm not the same man I was, not angry, not wounded, just free. You can lose your marriage, your house, even pieces of your past. But if you hold on to your integrity, if you protect your mind, your name, and your peace, there's nothing they can steal that truly defines you. Some people wait for the chance to prove someone wrong. I just waited to remember who I was. And when that day came, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand acknowledgement. I just stood up and walked forward. Not back. Forward. Always.